Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you as always for tuning back in. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Layla, the Lenormand Reader, and I am one of the few people who focuses almost exclusively on the Lenormand practice. So welcome to a new tutorial. What I have for you in mind today is talking about the order of the cards in a combination and whether that matters to how we interpret the combination or not. I call this idea directionality. I know that different authors might use a different word for it. I don't think that's really important. You can use whatever word you like to use to point to this idea. The idea mainly is whether the order of the cards in a combination matters to how we make sense of the combination. So I have a few combinations prepared for us to go through some examples to talk through this. I have some examples where I feel that the order of the cards matter, and another set of examples where I feel that the order doesn't matter. And then once we've covered these combinations, we're going to draw a few random ones and see whether they have directionality or not. So starting with the combinations that I feel have directionality, I have one first set here, the anchor and the road. So the anchor and road, I feel, suggests that we pick up and leave. So the anchor is a card that is put, it is settled, it is deeply rooted, whereas the road is a card of change and movement. So when I see the cards in this order, I feel that we pick up and leave. When we have them in the other order, I feel that there is this idea of arriving. So obviously we've been traveling and we arrive, we drop the anchor. And I think directionality is really clear in this combination. I do have the house in here as well because I feel that the same idea applies to the combination with the house. So in a way, the anchor and the house are similar. They play the same role in this combination. The road and house suggests arriving home or, finding a home possibly. And then when we have the house and road, it is possible that we move homes or that we change. The fact that the road is at the end of the line makes the combination open-ended, whereas the house is a card of closure and this idea of an inner state and a foundation and a strong sense of being settled. The road is actually the opposite of that. So that is pretty clear in terms of the directionality that figures in these cards. And of course, you give me your feedback. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this. So here is another combination. We have the flowers and the whip. So the whip on the other side of the flowers, I feel can upset a little bit the positive energy of the flowers. The whip is the most challenging card of the deck. Many authors agree on this, whereas the flowers, even though it's a pretty positive card, I can't say that it is the brightest card of the deck. There are stronger cards in this sense, like the sun and possibly also the clover, the star. They are a bit stronger than the flowers in terms of their positivity. Let me know what you think of this. So when I see the whip on the other side of the flowers, I feel that it upsets a little bit the energy of the flowers. Whereas if we had the flowers on the other side of the whip, like to the right, then it is possible that the flowers help overcome a little bit the challenges of the whip. There is this idea of healing and recovery and renewal that is very much associated with the flowers, or at least I see it that way in my own dictionary, and I'll link my dictionary for you. And so I feel in this order, the flowers helps overcome a little bit the challenges of the whip. I think the same applies with the star, and here as well I have another card to sort of see if there are any nuances. The star is a bit stronger than the flowers, and definitely in this order it helps overcome, at least to some extent, the challenges of the whip. And if the star is before the whip, I feel as well that the whip can upset a little bit the star. Now sometimes I feel that the star is very strong, and so I don't always see the whip as upsetting the star. But it depends on the context, and also the order of the cards can weigh on this a little bit. So when I see the whip after the star, I feel it can challenge a little bit the extent of our wishes materializing. It's still a really bright card. It probably is going to minimize a little bit the strength of the whip, but still, you know, you could say they're almost on equal level when it comes to how positive the star is and how challenging the whip is. So when they're together, you know, there might be a bit of a tug here in terms of who trumps who. So you let me know again what your thoughts are about this. Let's move on to a third example. What do I have here for you? The sun and clouds. Now, this is an interesting one. I want to start with this order. So the clouds and sun are a very obvious combination because they occur in nature. Like we see it all the time. We always see clouds covering the sun and then the sun coming out from the clouds. You know, it's just a really obvious metaphor, and it's really not even a metaphor. So when we see the sun on the other side of the clouds, it's very obvious that the sun comes out, right? So again, there's this idea of reading from left to right. And of course, I appreciate that you read in the opposite direction. So you can just sort of do the reverse. If you read in the opposite direction, the same idea of directionality would apply. So with the sun after the clouds, clearly the sun comes out. Whereas if we had the sun before the clouds, it's possible that here the clouds are covering the sun a little bit, so things can become a little bit unclear. There can be a bit of a depression, or the brightness of the sun is a little bit compromised. But I think in either way, the sun being such a strong card and the clouds not being all that challenging, at least as far as I'm concerned, I still feel that regardless of the order or the directionality of the cards here, I feel that the combination suggests a silver lining, and it advises us to look for that silver lining because the sun is, after all, very, very bright. It's just that in this order, it's possible that the clouds overshadows the sun a little bit. So this is the third example. What is the last one that I have for you? Nice. So the coffin and key. This is an interesting one. It's one of those that I sat and thought about for a little bit when I was a few years ago, when I was building my card combinations dictionary, which I said I would link below. So in this combination, I don't really see it as a challenging, or overcoming the challenges. Notice that with the sun and clouds, and with the star and flowers, or flowers and whip, or star and whip, the directionality sort of mattered because of whether a card is positive or negative, and what is the outcome on the other side. So I feel that with directionality, when they are opposite, that's when the strongest sense of directionality comes through. This is something I've noticed. With the coffin and key, it's not so much that there's challenges versus positive things, even though the key is very positive. In fact, it's one of the brightest cards of the deck. But with the coffin, what I see here is the idea of opening versus closing. And that's a more neutral concept. It can be positive or negative either way. So this is where, more cards or context is needed. So when I see the key on the other side of the coffin, I feel this is an opening, because the key is, the what enables you to open something, whereas the coffin, it's closed. When there is the coffin on the other side of the key, it suggests to me closing. So this is where it's not positive versus negative, or a challenge is resolved or not, but it is an action. So that's a bit of a different energy that we're seeing here. So very interesting how directionality can affect your interpretation of the cards. So let me know your thoughts about this. Let's now move on to combinations where I feel directionality doesn't matter so much. So what do I have here? The scythe and the garden. So the scythe and the garden clearly points to a breakup of a group or separating yourself from a certain environment. Of course, in certain contexts or with more cards, it can mean other things, because the scythe is one of those cards that can mean a few things. So I'm not focusing too much on context. I'm focusing more on a general a more general way of interpreting the cards for the sake of illustrating this concept of directionality. So the scythe and garden, I feel, points to a breakup or a separation from a certain environment. And I don't really see that it would be different if we had the scythe and garden in the garden and scythe in the other way. I think either way, it's pretty clear. And it's interesting because when we were looking at the road and the house, there is a parallel between these two combinations. There is the idea of place that is represented by each of the house and garden, whereas the road and scythe, they represent the concept of change. But I do not feel that the way the cards interact in combination is the same in both. This is where different cards offer different nuances and where you want to become more refined with your understanding of the cards so that your vocabulary is actually richer. So whereas the house and road in this order would mean leaving or parting from a certain place, and the other way would mean the opposite, it would mean arriving, I don't see this idea applying to the garden and scythe, even though there is quite a lot in common between the scythe and road and the house and garden. Do you see what I mean? So keep these nuances in mind and practice. Do some combination exercises and see if you're picking up directionality, and you start developing these refinements with the cards. Pretty valuable exercise. Let's move on to another combination where I feel it doesn't really matter the order of the cards. So the snake and letter, whether it is in this order or the other order, I feel also doesn't really matter. And again, what I'm picking up is that directionality seems to matter when there is a clearer difference between the cards where they seem to be opposite in energy. That's where I think directionality comes out the most. So you also try to notice where it comes through mostly for you. So in this combination, I feel it's a tricky message regardless of the order of the cards. It sounds like it's maybe a secret. And again, it doesn't seem to matter in what order. A third example, the bear and the ship. Interesting. So here is another movement versus no movement kind of combination, like we saw with the anchor road. In my dictionary, the anchor and bear have a lot in common. They are both very strong cards. They stand strong in their ground. They can be stubborn, like tough. And the road and ship are two movement cards. But again, I'm not seeing that there is the same energy that comes through in the bear and ship combination, even though each of these cards have a lot in common with each of the top two cards. So the anchor and road, just like with the house and road, this idea of picking up and leaving, and then road and anchor is this idea of arriving. But with the bear and ship, I don't feel it's about the arriving versus leaving. The bear is a card of strength and importance. It makes anything big. It has that sense of leadership and authority. And so when I see the bear and ship together, this can be a very important trip. This can be an important project, the idea of stepping up to some big deal of a venture. And I think this applies regardless of the combination, ship and bear as well. It's like this trip or this project or this adventure that is represented by the ship is empowering. It opens doors, and the combination clearly encourages us to, embrace the adventure that we're seeing with the ship. And it can also be a big trip or maybe an expensive one. This too can apply. So that was my third example. Let's move on to the fourth one, the rider and mouse. Now, here is where there can be potentially opposite energies. The rider is quite an enthusiastic card. It has quite a bit of momentum. The mouse is a bit negative, and it's also, it's one of those, it has like a draining kind of energy. So they're pretty opposite in this sense. It can also be a slower card, although I've seen quite a few authors who take the mouse to mean something speedy. I can't really see that in the mouse because the mouse is more typically associated with challenges. So I tend to see it as representing obstacles and speed bumps, things getting in your way. So that probably means that it's going to slow you down because you have to stop and fix these things. But with the rider and mouse, in either direction, I'm not seeing that there is too much of a difference. The rider and mouse can point to challenges ahead, a speed bump ahead. And with the mouse and rider, it can, suggest something similar. The idea of having to slow down, or, they're feeling that there's something dragging you a little bit. You could sort of not see it this way. You could see this order as suggesting overcoming an obstacle and now moving forward. Whereas if you have the rider and mouse in the first order, you are about to have to deal with an obstacle or have to slow down. I guess you can sort of read directionality in these cards if you want to. I don't feel it comes out as strongly as with some of the other combinations I read earlier, but it's still a possible way you might want directionality to matter in such a combination. So these are my suggestions for combinations where I feel the directionality matters and doesn't matter. Let's draw a few ones randomly. I'm going to take a third deck just so that all the cards are in there. And let's see a few examples that maybe we didn't cover at random. Here's one, and here's two. The mouse and star. So the mouse and star, the mouse is really not as strong as the star in terms of positivity versus negativity. I clearly see that the star easily overcomes the challenges of the mouse. But if we had the star before the mouse, honestly, I don't think the mouse is strong enough to mess up the positive energy of the star. So I would want to read this combination as suggesting that we are going to be able to overcome any challenge that comes our way, that the challenges are smaller than what we're capable of doing, and that we have a much stronger optimism, than the negativity of the mouse. I also think the combination might advantages us in a way. The mouse is a bit challenging, but it does have some positive aspects, like it is very cautious, it is very good with detail, picking out the smaller things. So with a positive card like the star, its positive aspect can help bring out the positive aspect of the mouse as well. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think of such an interpretation? Let's try another example. Here's the garden, and here is the lily. Now that is a very neutral combination. See, this is something I'm picking up as well. When there is a clear positive negative between the cards, that's where directionality seems to come out the most. When the cards are more on the neutral side, it doesn't seem to matter all that much. With the garden and lily, it's really not about directionality or what's happening. It seems to be pointing to a place. The lily with the garden can point to the workplace. I've seen authors who interpret it as a hospital. That too is possible. It can also suggest networking with your professional environment. So again, it's not positive or negative, it's just a dynamic or a place. So the lily qualifies what kind of place the garden is. And I personally don't feel that the direction of the cards would matter here. But again, tell me what you think. Let's move on to a couple more combinations. Here is the child, new beginning, typically positive. And let's draw the sun, right? So here it's positive, positive. So it's not going to matter. You see, this is where I feel that, again, what I'm picking up here. The child and sun is a beautiful new beginning. It is great for children. A very abundant combination, that sense of openness. And again, I don't feel that it would matter if we had the sun and child together in this order. Pretty obvious, this one. No directionality as far as I'm concerned. And last one, the road again. Let's see now. The road and clover. So here you see we have neutral positive. Neutral positive, and obviously this is a wonderful journey, a very happy path ahead. It can be a coincidence, like bumping into something on the way. But again, you know, I'm not seeing that it makes a difference here, whether it's clover road or clover. The idea is to move ahead, and so the clover is very encouraging of the path ahead, of making changes, making a choice, pursuing the path ahead, you know, is obviously quite a blessed combination here with the clover. So these are my thoughts for you. These are some examples of directionality where I felt it mattered, where I felt it didn't matter, and then these examples where we applied these ideas to a randomly drawn pair. So let me know your thoughts about this. Let me know if you apply this concept to your reading practice. Where do you think it applies most strongly? If there are times when you see it, when you don't see it. I'd love your feedback about this. I always look forward to your comments. So I hope this was helpful. That is going to help you look at the cards with a bit more refinement, with more nuances. Very best of luck with your journey. Be sure to keep me posted about where you're at. And until next time, thank you for watching and take very good care of yourself.